Okay, why don't we kick off? Carolyn, you'll keep letting people in as they come in. So, good afternoon, everyone. You should have seen as you came in that we're recording this session. So anyone who isn't fortunate enough to see us live can see it at some future time and date. Those of you who weren't here, someone suggested it's a good idea if you can have your microphones on mute while we're speaking. You'll see that there is a section at the end for questions and comments. We will come back, and of course, if you do have a question, then you'll put your mic on. So really lovely to see everyone here in front of me. A really good afternoon and a huge warm welcome from me, Andrew Miller, the chair of the trustees. And I'd like to extend that warm welcome from not just me, but from all my fellow trustees to this, the AGM being held in November 2021. As probably most of you are aware, and maybe many of you were there, this is now the second AGM that we have held online rather than being in person and face to face. And I think last year, I can't remember everything I said, but I'm pretty sure that I said something along the lines of this will hopefully be the first and only AGM that we have online. So it just shows how wrong you can be. None of us expected the longevity of the pandemic to be as it is. So I'm going to say it again, that I really hope that next year we are actually going to be meeting face to face again. I'm sure given everything that's happened this year and everything I'm seeing outside TCF, that we'll probably do it if we are face-to-face, hybrid as well. So we'll still be able to have people who can't make it beaming in by Zoom or whatever means. So I'm going to take just a few minutes to, apart from welcoming you, to say a few things. And I want to start by saying that this is quite a significant AGM. And you may ask why, because although it's the second one we're having during the COVID pandemic, and last year when we met, of course, was in November, and we were 8-9 months into the pandemic by then. Last year's AGM was in respect of the financial year up to 2020. This AGM is in respect of the financial year, 1st of April 2020 to the 31st of March 2021. And so what you'll see from that is that the significance is that our financial year started within 7 days, or almost coincided with the start of the lockdown, which I'm sure everyone has ingrained in their mind, started on the 23rd of March 2020. So the story in respect of which we're having this AGM and which we're reporting on really is the story of the first year of the Compassionate Friends operating under completely different circumstances. And so this AGM is to tell you as the members and report to you as the members how the charity did in that first year, and that incredibly different and difficult year, and the manner in which we operated the charity during that year. And of course, you've seen that the trustees report. There were matters that were greatly curtailed, but in short, if someone was to ask a short question as to how we did, or to ask me, my short answer would be that we did extremely well. And I actually think that saying that is a bit of an understatement. And if I could add another extreme, I think we did extremely, extremely well. So you are going to hear the detail of that from our CEO, Carolyn Bryce, who I'm sure most of you know. And Carolyn is going to give you more details as to what the charity did, moving from essentially almost everything except the social media platforms being face-to-face to becoming a charity that was operating essentially in an online format. You're going to hear from Nigel Taylor, one of our trustees, an extremely valued trustee, who provides us with excellent accounting experience and who looks after our finances and guards our pennies and our pounds. And he will tell you what happened in terms of finances to the charity over that last financial year. And you're also going to hear from Stephen Armstrong, who's our amazing fundraiser, and he will talk us to the challenges that he has faced as our fundraiser going into the pandemic, and everything that he has done, and I have to say done magnificently to ensure that the pounds and pennies that Nigel guards for us, to ensure that they've kept coming in. And so you'll hear about the challenges, and I'm sure many of you as volunteers, of course, know, and indeed as members, that TCF faced in having to move everything online, having to deal with the reality of there being fewer fundraising events, fewer funds available to us, and everything that presented to us, and how we dealt with those challenges. But I want to take a few minutes that I have to concentrate not on the difficulties that we faced, but on the successes that we saw. And the first is obvious, it's that the charity adapted. And I'd like to say, because the way I feel about it, I know many do, and certainly many of my fellow trustees, it's not just adapted, that those involved embrace the challenge. And it may be that the reality is that, of course, we had no choice, but there are many charities I know of and heard stories that were not able to embrace the challenge in the same way that we have, and not able to adapt as we have. And I think that is a huge success that we have as a charity and have had during that year. And what is our charity all about? You as volunteers and members know all too well. It's about providing bereaved parents and siblings with a safe place, a safe environment where they can express their grief and get support, and in the main, peer-to-peer support. And all those meetings that were face-to-face, all those many retreats, and I think we were up to about 7 retreats a year, stopped immediately. And so not being able to do those, what we saw was the movement of that peer-to-peer support going online. And Carolyn obviously will talk some more about that. But the support groups moved from their usual places to gathering in this virtual world, and it brought new experiences. It brought a wider audience as well, who were able to tune in than maybe attend physically. So we've learned lots of lessons from that. But we didn't just move the meetings. The one thing we did that we already had was the helpline. That never stopped. That kept going, and it didn't miss a single day. The social media groups continued and gained in strength. The retreats could not happen, but they were replaced with online specialist support groups to mirror what happens at the retreats, where you go for the individual group sessions. And we made sure that the leaflets, the incredible array and library of leaflets that we have, continued. Everything is, and already was, available online, but it certainly is now. And again, reaches an incredibly wide audience, not simply of members, but we know of bereaved parents and siblings, not just in the UK, but around the world, access our services in that form. And on top of that, we continue to recruit volunteers, and we continue to train volunteers. And that's quite something, given given where I personally think where the world has been. And through all this, we still needed to keep the office going. And that was an office that could not be attended by the staff. And so that moved into individual kitchens, living rooms, dining rooms, bedrooms, but it kept going. And everything was moved again to an online basis with members of staff doing it. So my first thanks, and I don't do any of this in any particular order, is to say a huge thank you to the TCF staff for what they achieved in this year that was something quite different from what anyone imagined whatsoever. Under Carolyn's management and guidance, the individual members of staff worked incredibly hard, took on additional hours, worked diligently, and they did it all to ensure that the services continued to be supplied not simply to those who had already utilized them in the past, but that the services were available to those who found themselves newly bereaved at an incredible difficult time during the pandemic. And that, for me, again, is quite something that we didn't simply say, well, we've got to look after those that we already look after, but we kept looking forward as we always have done as a charity, and we kept welcoming newly bereaved parents and siblings. So for me personally, on behalf of the trustees, I give a massive thank you to the wonderful TCF staff. I also just want to take this opportunity to thank Buzz de Villiers, who I'm sure many of you know, who is leaving TCS this month, having been with TCF, I think it's nearly 10 years, but I may be wrong. Carolyn will correct me if I'm wrong, if I've got an underestimate. I'm sure many of you, if not most of you, will have met Buzz at one of the many events that we used to have, and hopefully we'll be going back to, and of course have had dealings with him in the office. So we wish him all the best in his future. So my second but equal thanks go to the volunteers. It is all of the volunteers who make, as well as the staff, of course, but the volunteers who make all this possible in terms of our charity, and make it possible that we continue to provide services, and not just provide them so well. And it is the dedication of the volunteers that's really at the heart of the charity, and is at the heart of when those who come into the charity feel immediately at home and feel that they have found the right place to help them. And so a huge thank you. The fact that the volunteers, it's one thing for staff to take on, but the fact that the volunteers were able to adapt the methods by which they provided their peer-to-peer support, and to move so many of the groups from a in-person format to a face-to-face format is absolutely fantastic. It meant that those services continued to be provided, and those who needed it were able to get the help and support that they wanted. So a huge thank you to the volunteers. Without you, there would be no charity. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. So those of you who have been giving your services, I think you should feel absolutely proud of what you have done and what you've been able to achieve this last year, and going into the financial year we're dealing with, but even since then up to date. And I'm sure as part of it, I know I have in terms of the group that we run in Northwest London, we've learnt new skills. And I hope that we'll be able to use those skills going forward. Hopefully, if we do get ourselves into more of a face-to-face, in-person format. what you may have seen, I think just pause in terms of the volunteers, what you may have seen if you've been through the trustee report is that very sadly we lost a few volunteers this year. The details of them is there at page 9 of the report, but I just want to read out their names. They gave many years of service, huge contribution to TCF, much loved, and they supported many bereaved parents and siblings and their families. I'm just going to read out their names, and if you don't know who they are, then you'll be able to read where they were within the UK, etc. It's Pat Bradshaw, Robert Tregold, Philip Clark, Denise Watson, and Yvonne Glasgow. So our thanks to them and our huge commiserations to their family, their friends who have lost such dear and treasured individuals and volunteers to us. And so once again, I'm thanking you on behalf of volunteers, on behalf of the trustee board, for all the efforts that you have done. As I'm sure you're aware, let me finish in terms of the trustees, and I'm sure you're aware that the trustees are here to provide for the governance of the charity. And we're here, our position as trustees is as it is for any charity. It's an important and essential role, and it's one that can only be done and is done by my fellow trustees taking the role seriously. I've been involved in the trustees now for 6 years, and I've seen how it has developed and matured over that time period into the board, and very much the working trustee board that it is now. And our role is governance. We leave the day-to-day running to Carolyn and her staff, but it's governance. We're overviewing. But one of the things that we wanted to do as a trustee board, and I'm in the second year as chair, and I was very keen, we wanted to make sure that we had our strategy in place. And for me personally, and I know for all of the trustees, that was very important to do, because a trustee board shouldn't just say to the CEO, well, just get on with it. A trustee board there is to give some sort of guidance, some sort of roadmap to work from, and from which the charity can grow. So one of the things that we have done in this financial year as trustees is spend a large amount of time actually working out our strategic objectives going forward. And we have put in place a 3-year plan. When I say we, there was a subcommittee. I'm incredibly indebted to those who put long hours in to get these objectives there in place. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to read to you, just so you have an idea what they are. We're going to make the strategic plans that, available for people to see online. But I think it would be helpful just to know where the trustees, what our thinking was and where we came to and what we've handed over to Carolyn. And what we do is we review it at every trustee board meeting. We review what's happening with the strategy. So it's not simply putting it in place and then in 3 years' time saying, well, how do we do? We keep an eye on it. I know it assists Nigel with the finances, and it assists Stephen in terms of his fundraising. So let me just read them out to you quickly. They're numbered 1 to 5, but they're in no particular order. So number 1 is to increase the reach, quantity, scope, and quality of services to bereaved parents. Secondly, to expand the services of TCF in those regions of the UK which are underserved. Thirdly, to increase the diversity and reach of TCF across all minority and underrepresented groups, both in our service and throughout our organisation. Fourthly, to improve and develop support for bereaved siblings. And fifthly, to increase specialist support for bereaved parents. And sixthly, there's 6, my mistake, is to increase public awareness of TCF. And what you'll see those, there's of course some overlap between them. But for me, one of the essential things that we need to do going forward is to increase the reach and the scope and the quantity of our services to bereaved parents. And that means looking in all different areas. It means looking at as we have done, but it also means concentrating and thinking about where are we not reaching? Are there areas, are there minority groups that we're not reaching? Are there diverse groups that we're not reaching? And trying to work out how can we do. There are always going to be individuals who do not want assistance from TCF, but our aim has to be to ensure that people have a choice and that they know about them. And so the board has been very much working on having this strategy in place that will allow Carolyn and her team to work incredibly hard to make sure that the arms of TCF can reach as far as possible. So that's the aim. We must continue to ensure that TCF continues to grow, continues to reach, but we can't do any of this without our volunteers and our staff, and that's why you are there, and that's why you are so involved in the process, and you make it all possible. I just want to finish by thanking my fellow trustees. Many of them are online, for everything they've done, for the hard work they put in. I could not chair as I do without your help and assistance, so I'm grateful for that. I've run over my time greatly, so I'm going to sign off now. And I'm personally feeling incredibly upbeat about the future. I don't need to preach to this audience what an amazing charity TCF is. I'd be pushing very much at an open door. But I think what I do need to remind you all is just how amazing you are and how amazing the work you do is. And ask you never to forget that and simply to continue to do that. So thank you very much for listening to me. A warm welcome, and now we'll get down to the detail of the AGM. So the first thing is you would have been provided with the minutes of the, I think the agenda says 2019, but it was the AGM held in 2020. Hopefully some of you, if not all of you, had a chance to look at those minutes. Is there anything that needs correcting in those minutes that anyone would like to bring up? Then can I ask that someone propose that we adopt those minutes? Millian, thank you. Seconder, Sheila, thank you very much. Any objections? Good. Any matters arising from those minutes? I'm having to switch screens to see if anyone's put their hand up, but I can't see. Thank you very much for that. So that they're there. So as I said, we're going to start with Carolyn, who's going to give us the presentation of the annual review. Over to you, Carolyn. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can all hear me, because I had a bit of a dodgy microphone recently, but just kind of go like this if you don't hear me or something. So it's really wonderful to see you all here. And I want to, like Andrew, actually, firstly say thank you to you for all your support for this wonderful charity, and also to our amazing volunteers, and also our dedicated chair, who you've just heard from, and trustees, all of whom are volunteers themselves as well. And lastly, but not least, to our really hardworking and hugely committed staff team that you've heard about from Andrew. For those who don't know me, my name's Carolyn Bryce. I've been CEO of the Compassionate Friends since summer 2017. I'm also a bereaved parent. I lost my 9-year-old daughter, Rosie, suddenly almost 17 years ago now. I'm absolutely passionate about the benefits of peer support for bereaved parents and their families, as I know how much sharing and talking with others in a safe and understanding environment can make to the whole experience of grieving for our child, sibling or grandchild. This afternoon, I'm privileged to have been granted some time to tell you more about the activities of our charity between April 2020 and March 21, and particularly, as Andrew said, how we've adapted during a very challenging year. And I'll also hopefully have an opportunity and time to tell you something about our exciting plans for the future and how we'll meet those strategic objectives, or try to. More detail is available in the trustees' annual report and financial statements, but I hope that will give you a flavour of our past, current and future activities. So as Andrew mentioned, the year from April 2020 began with the UK in lockdown. And like so many charities, we experienced an immediate fall in income, particularly in the first 6 months between April and September of 2020. Lots of uncertainty faced by trusts and foundations, as well as individual and corporate donors, had a huge effect on charitable giving. And there was also a falling away of challenge events and community fundraising, and Stephen will tell you a bit more about that later. But the charity's income was not the only aspect under pressure. The change in our operational environment, as Andrew said, was really profound. Increased uncertainty, anxiety, the inability to meet in person was particularly challenging for those in early raw grief, and heightened the sense of isolation for many bereaved families. Add to this all the constant talk of death and grim statistics in the news, images of hospital intensive care settings, and the inability to be in person with friends and family as a comfort. Then the peer support delivered by this charity was needed more than ever during such a challenging time. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that? Hopefully you can see that. Right. So our charity, as Andrew said, adapted very quickly. And we revised our income forecast and budget, while we also adapted our services. And these were our key priorities during the lockdown year. We wanted to stay connected with bereaved parents, not only those that we were already supporting, but also those, as Andrew said, that became bereaved sadly during the year. And then very much to keep connected and support our volunteers as much as possible, as it was a very anxiety-provoking time for everybody, including those doing the supporting. So during the year, our wonderful and dedicated National Helpline volunteers really stepped up and ensured that throughout each of the waves of coronavirus, every helpline session was covered. And they undertook over 1,100 supportive conversations on the helpline that year. And we also experienced a growth in email requests for support. And over 650 parents, families and professionals contacted us by email to our helpline. And I just want to thank Ruth Mercier, our helpline and volunteer manager, for all her work coordinating and supporting our wonderful helpline team during this period, and answering just about single-handedly, answering with sensitivity and compassion most of these email requests and inquiries. So thank you, Ruth. Andrew mentioned our 11 moderated, confidential, private online Facebook groups, and they really came into their own too. And especially as they were focused on specific aspects of loss and life circumstances. So they were really a lifeline for many when we couldn't meet. The Grief Companion Scheme, offering peer befriending to bereaved parents in early grief, had also went from strength to strength during the lockdown year. The scheme was quickly prioritised by us during this period because we wanted to ensure that no newly bereaved parent was left isolated wherever possible. We received the first tranche of funding for the scheme from the National Lottery in February 2020, so just before the lockdown. And Shirley Gower was appointed a coordinator for the Grief Companion Scheme in June 2020. Over the period of this report, the scheme has been brilliantly developed by Shirley to offer outstanding one-to-one support service to over 100 bereaved parents in their first couple of years of bereavement. And that support is given by volunteer grief companions. Thank you to Shirley and all our wonderful volunteer grief companions for the compassion and empathy they've offered parents in their first couple of years of loss. An evaluation process has now begun during the period of the report and continues, and which has provided lots of feedback to improve and develop the experience of the newly bereaved parents and also the volunteers. As Andrew said, well over half of our local support groups during this year relocated online, so we could continue to offer the power of the facilitated peer groups experience to bereaved parents, albeit via digital video conferencing. Support and training to move those support groups online was offered to all our group facilitators, and many other volunteers, our wonderful volunteers, kept in touch with parents by phone, messaging, and meeting outdoors when permissible. Thank you to our wonderful volunteer team and Ruth Mercier, our volunteer and helpline manager, for everything they did during that year to keep contact and support going so brilliantly. It really was a challenging year, and we adapted brilliantly, and you adapted brilliantly. In April 2020, again, as Andrew mentioned, we began a series of well-attended meetings online for volunteers. So we offered an opportunity, I guess, for volunteers to stay connected with TCF, stay connected among themselves and also with the staff team. We provided in those meetings information on the impact of coronavirus on bereavement support. We've heard from guest speakers in the bereavement support sector, and they also offer a forum to share, for volunteers to share and discuss experiences and challenges during such unprecedented times. Online meetings also began for specific teams of volunteers, so our Facebook moderators, our helpline support, our local contacts all have specific meetings. So this move to online meetings and sharing sessions for our volunteers has been really beneficial for Compassionate Friends and for volunteer support. It's really helped us to break down the geographical barriers we've always experienced for a national charity, of how to stay in touch and motivate and inspire, I guess, our volunteers throughout the UK. And we've also been able to continue our training for group facilitators and also started training and information sessions for local contacts as well through Zoom. So we really utilise the online space as much as we can. As Andrew said, as a result of the pandemic, we had to cancel or postpone all our planned 2020 and 2021 weekend and in-person retreats and gatherings, including actually our first supportive weekend, which we planned solely for TCF volunteers as a sort of support and training weekend. But instead, we established a series of online events. So kind of online support groups of parents bereaved in specific ways, or for those in differing circumstances, for instance, lost to suicide, lost to cancer. We started with a group for bereaved fathers. We've got a group for a loss of a baby or a young child, an older adult child, and a group for parents who've lost their only child or all their children. And we are expanding this list of specialist groups into this year as well. And we also started a group especially for adult bereaved siblings. All these online groups were organised and supported, and the volunteer facilitators supported expertly by our events coordinator, Sharon Rose. All the groups were facilitated by trained volunteers and have allowed bereaved parents from all over the UK to connect with others online, similarly bereaved or in similar circumstances, in a way that just would not be possible in person. So we've run, over this year that we're talking about, we've run almost 80 online support groups for parents and siblings. And we're continuing to these occasional online groups now, even though we can meet back in person for the foreseeable future. They've been so successful, the feedback's been brilliant. In August 2020 also, we began a series of online talks, maybe some of you came to them, by bereaved parents and siblings, offering their own personal reflections on their loss. These were a highly successful addition to our support services, with over 150 attendees at each. Speakers included the wonderful Sangeeta Madhavan, Maria Hearn, equally wonderful, Kathy Renson-Brink, the author who lost her brother, and many others. Each speaker has offered the bereaved an opportunity to come together online and find understanding and comfort and hopefully some hope from listening to our speakers' personal and unique perspectives on grief and loss. We live streamed all the talks on social media and recorded each talk, lodged them online, and so many more have listened to these speakers in the weeks and months after the live events. And again, we plan to continue these series of talks and online events in 2022. We've had a little bit of a break, but we will restart again in 2022. We published a guide offering support around grieving for a child during the pandemic, and that was made available for download. And this was updated throughout the year and sent to all bereaved parents and their families who contacted us during the challenging 12 months we're talking about. The amazing Abby May and her volunteer team of editors have managed and coordinated the publication of over 50 leaflets and fact sheets, all uniquely written by bereaved parents and siblings. And new publications in this year included publications on bereaved parents and their faith, grieving for a young child, grieving for a preteen or teenage child, grieving for more than one child, and grieving for a twin. During the year, activities at our library, unique library, was limited for some months. But once there was an opening up, some service did resume, and our dedicated volunteer librarian, Mary Hartley, could once again restart, offering a personalised choice of titles to support the bereaved. And the library has now relocated to Kent and is offering a full service. Thank you so much, Mary, for all you do. Digital communication and the social media presence of the charity became increasingly important during the lockdown period. And our following on Facebook, Twitter, and new in this year, Instagram, continued to grow. We also launched the Compassionate Friends UK YouTube channel in August 2020, which houses, as I said, all the recordings of online talks and other supportive events, such as our worldwide candle lighting remembrance event, which happened in December 2020 and was held online for the first time. We're repeating this event this year on the evening of the 12th of December, so please do register to attend. It's a moving event of togetherness and remembrance. I hope you'll all attend. So like all charities, our website is our shop window. Although we've continued to make improvements, we recognise that after 4 years, the website needed a more radical update. So in January 21, we began a wholesale redesign to greatly improve the user navigation and freshen up and update the images and text to create a more supportive, inclusive and welcoming site. And the new site went live in June 2021. I also wanted to tell you that during the year, 2 of the most long-standing and dedicated volunteers retired from their supporting roles. That's Hugh McAninch, our regional coordinator for Scotland, and Anita Murray, who was our regional coordinator for Northern Ireland. They both stepped down in April 2020 with over 30 and 20 years service respectively. And we warmly thank them both for their extraordinary dedication and commitment to the charity and the many bereaved parents and families to whom they've made a difference over so many years. And in March 2020, we appointed March 21, we appointed Sharon McKelvey as Regional Volunteer Coordinator for Scotland and Northern Ireland to offer continuity of support to our volunteers in these regions. and continue a Hugh and Anita's work to develop TCF's reach to bereaved families in both territories. So I wanted to also tell you that during the time between August and October 2020, we commissioned a series of research studies to underpin the development of the 3-year strategic plan that Andrew mentioned. So the first of these focused on the analysis of child and young person deaths in the UK to help us to better understand the ages and causes of child and young person deaths in the country and trends in mortality in these age groups and in regionally as well, which will help us to organise our support. The second study analysed bereavement support service providers in the UK. So that gave us a lot of information about the context and the environment in which our charity operates and how TCF's peer support fits in currently with the provision from other charities and organisations that we work with. Finally, we did a survey of parents, and I was helped on that by 2 of our trustees, Jill Hardy and Sheila Phillips. We conducted a survey of parents bereaved in the last 6 years who had accessed our services during that time. And the findings, all these findings were used to develop a 3-year strategic plan by a committee of trustees and myself. So Andrew's told you something about the objectives, and there they are. I won't go through them again. But I just wanted to make clear that there is a dual focus in the plan, as there really must be. We not only are focused, we will be focused in the next 3 years, increasing the reach of our services to bereaved parents and families, and also developing the amount of those services, but also critically quality as well, the quality of those services. So that really puts the emphasis on improved support, I guess, for our volunteers so that they can then go forward and offer a quality peer support. So I just want to quickly finish by telling you about how we might achieve some of these objectives. So we will continue to prioritise care and support for our volunteers, all of whom offer the peer support and empathy, which is at the heart of this charity. We will do this by continuing a focus on self-care for volunteers, and we will offer a range of support, including writing workshops, yoga, all sorts of different aspects of self-care for volunteers. We've also introduced a listening support scheme for volunteers. In this financial year, it's called Here For You. And we have 2 qualified counsellors who are also bereaved parents and also have TCF volunteering experience. And they're offering our 250 volunteers in the UK a safe, confidential and supportive space where they can discuss and share any concerns or issues around their volunteering roles at TCF. And that's a hugely important addition to our support for volunteers, I think. We will also, to meet our objectives, continue to develop and grow the Grief Companion Scheme. And the scheme really reaches those areas of the country where there's little local support and helps us to further reduce the isolation and lack of support felt by many bereaved parents. Managed by our Grief Companion Coordinator, Shirley Gower, the scheme will continue to offer support to newly bereaved parents, so those in the first 2 years of their loss, given by bereaved parents who are at least 3 years past their own loss. The support of volunteer grief companions, I know, is a priority for Shirley, and she's been running a series of supportive sharing sessions with a training element for those volunteers. And we are currently recruiting a new part-time staff member to assist Shirley to ensure that we can continue to develop the scheme. I'll just quickly move to bereaved siblings, actually. So we will continue to, one of the strands of the objective is to increase our support for bereaved siblings. And we'll go back to running our twice yearly retreat for bereaved siblings. We'll continue our online support groups for brothers and sisters. But over the period of the plan, we hope to appoint a sibling coordinator to develop the recruitment and support of sibling volunteers. We've also already begun actually to offer one-day supportive events around the UK for bereaved parents as a way to resume in-person events, but in as safe a way as possible. So we've already held 4 support days around the country in Derbyshire, in Glasgow, in Hampshire and Belfast. They all happened in September and October, just gone. So these day events were really carefully planned and have been hugely well received, and the feedback has just been fantastic. So we're planning more day events in 2022 to complement the resumption of weekend retreats. We'll continue to encourage informal events for bereaved parents, including our wonderful series of walks run by Terry Ahern in London and Fiona and David Chamberlain in Shropshire and the Welsh border. And we'll continue to try and recruit more volunteer walk leaders. And we did that by offering an online workshop supporting volunteers who wish to organise a walk for TCF parents and siblings. We're also going to be developing TCF's infrastructure. So recruiting additional key staff to build our capacities to support. So this includes an office manager who's already joined us last month, Karolina Zwierzyk, who joined us, as I said, in October, with a brief to develop the efficiency and capabilities of our national office and contribute to the running of the operational side of the charity. And with the help of our trustee advisor, Guy Payton, we will replace the charity's pre-King database to ensure it offers the best support to all the functions of the charity, so to the fundraising, the volunteer management, and membership communications functions of TCF. And we're also beginning to increase resourcing for fundraising with the appointment of Jenny King in September as our new events and community fundraiser. We're going to continue to build our peer support in regions of the UK and across diverse communities, firstly with our appointment, as I said, of Sharon McKelvey in Scotland and Northern Ireland. And we'll review this model over the period of the plan and continue to build support in other areas of the country where TCF support is less available, for instance, Wales, some of Northern England. We'll initiate analysis too to better understand the diversity and reach of TCF across minority and underrepresented groups, including groups like bereaved fathers, lower income communities, and ethnic communities. Over the period of the plan, we're also going to work. We're going to work to increase the profile and awareness of TCF within certain target groups who come into contact with bereaved families and may be able to signpost to us. So those people are people like police, educational establishments, like universities, schools, coroners, funeral directors, hospitals, GPs, social services, faith personnel, all those kind of people. So as part of our plan, we hope to appoint a communications specialist to develop a detailed and effective comm strategy to target and develop our these groups and develop our digital communications more generally. So there we are, a whistle-stop tour, sorry I've taken far too long, of last year's activities, and I've even missed some out. So some, and also some of our future plans. It's absolutely impossible to cover everything we've done in the last 12 to 18 months, but I do hope it's given you a flavour. I want to now just take another moment to pay tribute to our amazing volunteers who every day take time to listen and support, offer empathy and understanding to the newly bereaved. We're really indebted to each and every one of them, and I truly think they're just the most wonderful people. I also want to warmly thank our amazing staff team. They work tirelessly. They've been working tirelessly, often very long hours, with huge dedication to run the operational side of our charity, as well as all the coordinating and supporting our volunteers that they do. Warm thank yous go to some very special people who make up the staff team of TCF. Ruth Mercier, our volunteer and helpline manager, Sharon Rose, our events coordinator, Shirley Gower, our grief companion coordinator, and Sharon McKelvey, our newest regional coordinator. Also, just to mention to our admin and operational staff, Buzz de Villiers, who's sadly leaving us next Wednesday after 9 years actually in our national office. Charité Nakuze, who is our administrator, and also Karen Ivey, who's been helping us in the office on a temporary basis. Welcome also to our new office manager, Carolina, who's just in a few weeks been with us, has really made a positive impact in the office. And finally, to our two wonderful fundraisers, Stephen Armstrong and newest recruit, Jenny King, who just again worked tirelessly and with huge commitment to find a diverse range of sources of funds to ensure that we can continue to develop our support. So thank you for your attention and all your support for the important work of this amazing charity. I hope after listening to me and all the speakers this afternoon, and perhaps if you've managed to read it, you will vote shortly to endorse the trustees' annual report and financial statements. And I also look forward to any questions or comments you may have towards the end of this afternoon's AGM. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. And I think that you, as you said, you haven't covered everything. The comprehensiveness of what you have covered just shows just how much you and your staff do on a daily, weekly and monthly basis for the charity. So let's go to the money side. And Nigel, it's your turn. Hopefully you'll see your camera come back on, or at least your screen.
There you go.
Over to you, Nigel.
Thank you. So I know that for many people, financial statements can be a bit confusing and a bit daunting. And so I want to give you the sort of highlights of what's gone on during the year. There's lots of detail in the accounts for those that want to read it, but I'd like to leave you with a good impression of what's been happening and hopefully what's going to happen in the future. So for many people, understanding financial statements can be quite tricky. And one thing that I find helps people is to think of it a little bit like you'd think of your own personal finances. You have income in a year, you have expenditure, some of which you have to make, like your council tax, some of which is discretionary. And then you have savings. And in charity terms, savings are referred to as reserves. So that's all our reserves are. They're just money we haven't spent. They're our savings. So let's begin by looking at the last financial year. And so we started that year, or the beginning of the year, with reserves of about £355,000. And then we got our income, which came in at about £364,000, and we spent just £288,000. And we'll discuss those income and expenditure figures in a bit more detail in a minute, as they were obviously both affected by COVID. And because our income was greater than our expenditure by about £76,000, our reserves increased by that amount. And so we ended the year with reserves of £431,000. So let's try and put those figures into context a little bit. And I think perhaps a good way of doing that is to look at the last 5 financial years. And this chart just shows the income in those 5 years. And the first thing you can see, looking at the bar on the far right, which is the one that is the current financial year, is that our income fell quite considerably from the previous financial year. Karen's already touched on some of those reasons, but I'll let Stephen go into more detail on the challenges of fundraising in the middle of COVID. It's also just worth noting that the figures in the year to 31st of March 2019 are enhanced by a legacy we received that year of about £70,000. So if you exclude that, you can see that for the 4 years before this financial year, there was a steady increase or substantial increase in our income each year as Stephen's efforts paid fruit. But as I mentioned, obviously, last financial year was a little bit of a challenge. So now this darker coloured bar is the expenditure in each of the years. And again, you can see, looking at the far right side, our expenditure in the last financial year was less than it has been for some considerable time. We would have loved to have spent more money, but with the lack of face-to-face meetings and the lack of retreats, then that money just wasn't going to be spent. So you can see, looking from left to right at those darker blue bars, how the expenditure has increased over the last previous 4 years as we expanded our activities. And although we expanded our activities, they were of a different nature in the last financial year. And so we just didn't spend quite as much as we were expecting. And then this green line shows the reserves or the savings we had at the end of each of those financial years. And you can see on the far right side again that those reserves are fairly large at the end of the current financial year, and have basically increased quite significantly over the last 4 or 5 years, as in each year our income has exceeded our expenditure. Carolyn and Andrew both talked about the strategic plan, and you won't be surprised that it's going to cost money, and it's actually going to cost quite a lot of money to implement everything that the board and Carolyn wants to do. And so I thought it worthwhile just to have a look at what we think might happen over the next few financial years as we implement that plan. So this next chart just repeats on the left-hand side the financial situation at the end of the last financial year. So it's the same chart that was on the same figures that were on the far right of the previous slide. So that's where we were at 31st of March 2021. And what I'm going to show you first is the planned expenditures in each of the next 3 financial years. And you can see there that there's it looks like a steady, gentle increase, but actually over the 3 years, it's a very significant increase in our planned expenditure to implement all those plans that we have. And if we add the income to those lines, you can see that for this current financial year, the one that will end on the 31st of March 2022, that our income is expected to be lower than last year. And Stephen will talk about the challenges that he's facing in terms of raising income for us in a couple of minutes. But we do expect that income to rebuild over the next few years. And those of you that have got a sharp eye will have spotted that for each of the next 3 financial years, including the current financial year, we are expecting our expenditures to exceed the income. And what that means is that the reserves are expected to fall over each of the next 3 financial years as we implement that strategic plan. And really what that final chart is showing you is that because we have such a good level of reserves, we can implement those plans that come out of the strategic plan comfortably and with confidence over the next few years by using our reserves as we rebuild the sources of income going forward. So with that, let me hand over to Stephen so that he can fill us in more about what's going to go on the fundraising side.
Thank you, Nigel. Stephen, over to you.
Okay. Hi everyone. Great to see so many of you here. And as you can see from Nigel's slides, we've got our work cut out in fundraising over the next few years. But I'm just going to talk about what happened during the year. We're talking about April 2020 to March. Well, look, you can see my iTunes store. Okay, so these are some of the highlights and the challenges which we faced during the year, the first year of COVID and lockdown. And you can see here that we were able to increase some of the funds from grant-making trusts, although we didn't actually reach the target which we had set. I was probably a bit too ambitious with that target. So we didn't quite reach the target. We weren't far off, but we didn't quite reach it. But we were able to increase income from trust by 12%. And some of that income from trusts were grants specifically to help us react to COVID and to lockdown. So a few grants came in which helped us adjust and close down the office and provide some infrastructure and things like that, which we needed. And we were able to get a couple of, quite a few new funders on board. So, for example, the Robertson Trust in Scotland decided to support us with a grant of over £30,000 over the next 3 years, which is terrific. So there were some positives with the grant-making trusts. And also, if you look at the next bit, we also increased the income from legacies by nearly 300% over the previous year. And that's one of the sources of income which is always very difficult to judge. You can never tell when you might be lucky enough to receive a legacy. But every now and again, we put a drip message into our communications. And if anybody is thinking of making a will, then we encourage them to think about supporting the compassionate friends at the time. But the next two show a few of the challenges. So you can see here that fundraising and the challenge events fell by 130% from what we normally get. Normally we have people running and walking and swimming and cycling for us, which is fantastic. But of course, a lot of those events had to be cancelled. Some were cancelled completely, some were postponed for a year, they tried to go virtual and encourage people to raise money virtually. But even so, our income fell quite substantially from those kind of events. A few of you I know kindly attended the quizzes which we had online during that time. I think we had 4 of them, and thanks very much if you took part, because that certainly helped to raise some income. And as you can see here, income from individual donations fell by 35% as well, as people felt they weren't in a position perhaps to donate quite as much as they were previously. So those were some of the highlights and challenges of the last year. And overall, as you saw from Nigel's slide, our fundraising income fell from the previous year because of lockdowns, COVID, all sorts of reasons. Oh gosh, look at that. Okay, so now going on to the future. So I want to say welcome to Jenny, who Carolyn mentioned. I think Jenny is here. She might wave her hand if she feels like doing so. Jenny has joined as our community and events fundraiser. And I think as people are going to start walking and running and cycling and swimming and baking cakes and all sorts of things for us, hopefully over the next year or two, Jenny's going to be kindly responding to those people and supporting them in their events and in their challenges, and helping them to maximise the income raising potential that they can do. And we also hope to introduce a new TCF annual fundraising event, hopefully starting in May 2022, which we hope will begin an annual thing for us, where everybody can take part should they want to and raise some money, and it becomes a TCF event. And as Carolyn and Andrew and Nigel have mentioned, as fundraisers, we are here to support the work of the charity, the peer support work which you will provide. And part of that is to support the ongoing strategic plan with all the extra things that the charity wants to do, including the costs involved. So although we've done quite well over the last few years and our reserves are fairly high, as Nigel pointed out, we're going to be using those reserves over the next few years, and we've got to come up with new types of funding and sources of funding. And the last thing there, it says a warning. And I think it's just to say really that there is going to be pressure, I think, on individuals and households next year, that with inflation increasing and maybe economic uncertainty, that people may not feel as comfortable making donations every now and again. Certainly with trusts and foundations, a few of them have said to me that times are going to be hard. A lot of them used up, they gave increased donations last year in response to lockdown. And so they may not have as much money in the next few years. And a few of them are continuing to support just COVID related things. So there's going to be an increased pressure from trusts and foundations as well. So I think it's going to continue to be quite tough. And that brings me on to this next thing, which is to say that all of us in this meeting today were all fundraisers for TCF. I know I'm called the fundraiser and Jenny's called the fundraiser, but any opportunities you have to spot opportunities with companies or with your faith group, any clubs you belong to, any community organizations, then please just get in touch and let us know. If you're having a birthday and you feel like raising some funds for TCF, it's very easy to do on Facebook. And hopefully when we get to know this new TCF event next year, if you feel like taking part, that would be brilliant. So we'd love to see as many of you there as possible. And then again, as I said earlier, if you are thinking of making a will, then please think about TCF in your will. And then lastly, I think that I just want to say that Jenny's going to be increasing fundraising's presence on TCF social media as well, which I have been pretty bad at. So she's going to be, you'll be able to see more fundraising communications on Facebook and Twitter and so on. And just to say that, I just want to thank you as TCF members who are part of TCF, and you donate sometimes regularly to TCF. So thank you for all the donations that you're able to give us. Thank you as volunteers as well, because without the work you do and without responding to any queries or emails which I send you in order to ask information, I wouldn't be able to do what we do. And I just want to say lastly, it's a real privilege fundraising for TCF. It's an amazing organisation. So thank you to everybody, and I hope that gives you an idea of the challenges we face. And if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at the end.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thank you, Nigel, and again, Carolyn. Really, really comprehensive. And I'm sure anyone who hasn't had an opportunity to read the trustees' annual report and financial statements will now have certainly a much better idea of what they do contain, and they can take them away for a bedtime reading themselves. This is the most important part in terms of the formal part of the meeting, is we have to vote to adopt these, and we have to do this because that's what we're legally bound to do. It then means we publish our accounts, and indeed we publish this report. So having had it explained to you, I move that we do adopt the report. The report was sent to you by Carolyn in your invitation. Can I have someone to propose that, please? And I may not see you. Rosemary Sager, thank you. And can I have a seconder? Dina Perkins, sorry if anyone else had their hand up. I've got you all on my screen, so you're all quite small. Can I take that as a unanimous vote, or are there any objections at all to it? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. So you've heard a lot from us. This is now your opportunity to ask us any questions. What I suggest is if you, at the bottom of your screen, you see the reaction, there's a button called reactions, and you'll see as you click it, it comes up and says raise hand. If you can press that, then I will call out your name, and if you can unmute yourself, then we'll wait to hear your question. If we were sitting in person, then you'd all be waiting to get here, have your cake and tea and coffee, and it seems that you might all be waiting to do that anyway, given the time. No questions?
Comments?
Comments? Views? Brilliant. Okay, well, I can't see any hands up, so it simply remains for me then to bring the meeting, the AGM for 2021 for the financial year up to 31st of March 2021 to a close. Thank you very much for your attention. To thank Carolyn, Nigel and Stephen for their incredibly detailed reports and reporting today, and again repeating what we've already said, to thank staff and volunteers and trustees for everything they do for the charity. But thank you all very much for attending. It means that the charity means an awful lot to you, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful weekend of what's left of it.